Hi, welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Burney. A catalyst is defined as a person or thing that precipitates an event. A catalyst is something that it participates in a reaction, but does not get consumed in the reaction. There's a heart behind this podcast for, people with aspirations. There's a heart behind this podcast for motivated people that want to make a difference, that have a bias for action, that really, truly want to be a catalyst in the environment around them, both professionally and personally, in their homes, in their workplace, and beyond. So welcome to this podcast. I really hope you're enjoying the series that we're in. Welcome to this episode, and let's dive right in. Welcome back to the third episode with Rick Maurer. We're talking about change management, resistance. If you haven't caught the first two sections of this, segments of this conversation, definitely encourage you to go back and catch those. We're even talking about lattes in the second segment. So I love the way Rick pulled in something very simple and practical to relate to, whether you're a coffee drinker or not. I think you'll relate. So I appreciate that, Rick. As we jump into this third segment, I'm really excited to kind of hear you talk about what you're excited about, what energizes you, looking forward, kind of what's on deck for you.
Cool. Well, the big thing for me and the kind of it wasn't time off during the pandemic, but basically that kind of having a few steps backward. I thought, I don't really want to work on those big projects with people anymore. I've done it. I think there are consultants who do it really well, and so they ought to be working with them. What I'm planning to do more of is much shorter interventions, meetings, conversations with people about how do you seize those moments of possibility, and so that the conversations are really focused on, hey, we've got this big project coming up, and in the past, we get, it's what I call the big bang approach to change. We have a big active planning meeting, a lot of excitement, a lot of ideas, and then nothing happens. All right, how do we avoid that? What are some tips? And so it can really talk about what's the impact of these big promises and then it all fading away. What can you do to either retrieve things because that's already happened, or how do you avoid it in the first place? What's the temptation to have that big planning meeting, and then what's the temptation to avoid following up? And just give us some advice, kind of really tactical kind of advice on applying the stuff that I've been working on. And it all goes to those, my thinking about why people support and resist. And the seizing moments of possibility has a bunch of application activities. And my thinking there is that even without me, people could be looking at it and go, hey, we got this plan, we're the planning team. Let's take a look at application activity number 2. How could we be observing better? Here's some tips, how do we begin blending? And I really talk a chapter about how do we tweak what we're doing rather than making some huge change. I'm not trying to talk. And so I want to be there to support clients in those kind of little things. I was in a meeting like that just a couple of days ago. And for me, it was very exciting because these are really talented people. And I'm not trying to get in the way of their talent. I'm trying to do something that might help them bring out what they're already good at. Yeah. So that's my work these days. Yeah.
So those applications, you're looking to nudge, right? You're looking to kind of be a catalyst for reframing something or just
reframing. Yeah, reframing a fair amount, and also. Sometimes people say, I got it. I agree with what you're saying, Rick, and it's really hard for me to get out of my own way. And I go, okay, let's look at it. So that is for reframing, I guess. But we're both on the same side of the table trying to figure out, all right, what could you do? And how could you do it easily while it's safe to do? There's a thing that I learned in Gestalt, and it's a thing called creating safe emergencies. So you're trying to create something where somebody could, let's say, do something in a meeting where they're trying something new, but it's safe enough that if it doesn't work, they can go, oh, that's interesting. It didn't work, rather than there goes my career, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so really helping people take those little steps, it's just like a beginning golfer doesn't go, well, I think next week I'm going to see if I can get into the Masters. Well, you
Mm-hmm.
just don't do that. So how do you do this in a place where you can handle the risk?
Mm-hmm.
No. I'll give you an analogy. I've said before, I try very hard to play jazz, and sometimes I play it okay, and sometimes I don't. And there are things called jam sessions, and these are places where musicians get together. It's all voluntary, and there are levels. I mean, usually there's nothing on the door that lets you know at that level, but there's some you walk in and you just know you're not welcome.
Mm.
And or this is happening less and less, fortunately, but I would walk in a place and go, I don't belong here. I maybe belong here to have a beer and listen, but
Mm.
not to play. And so to find those places where I can try stuff out,
Mm.
and that if it doesn't go well, if I forget how that tune went, I'm embarrassed, but I'm not being thrown off the stand. There's a story about Charlie Parker, one of the real pioneers in jazz. As a kid, was playing in a jam session in Kansas City, and Joe Jones, who was one of the great drummers back in that era, he was Count Basie's drummer. That Charlie Parker just started playing this nonsense stuff. I mean, it wasn't like they didn't understand his language. He really didn't understand what he was doing. And Joe Jones took a cymbal off his kit and threw it at his feet. I mean, it's a real insult. Now
Mm.
for me, that would have been it. I would have given up playing. And Charlie Parker just started practicing more.
Oh man.
Yeah. So for him, he didn't the safe emergency stuff. That didn't make any difference at all. It's like, oh,
Right.
okay, well that was a mess. All right, so what do I do next time?
What do you do different?
But
Yeah.
most of us aren't like Charlie Parker. So.
No, but I like what you're saying there. I mean, to me, it's um, you're saying we want to manage the risk and to the extent that we can manage the environment, and just put forth a proportional. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. Just put it in a proportion, right, to what you're trying to accomplish and how prepared you are, how skilled you are, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So next, Rick, as we kind of start to land the plane here, it's important to me with experienced, successful people like yourself that the listeners of the Catalyst podcast get to hear. If you were, I don't really like to narrow in too much on age necessarily, but if you were a younger professional or in your first leadership role or aspiring for your first leadership role, whatever that dynamic is, what do you think are some of the more important pieces of advice that you would want to instill there?
There's the one bit of advice I wish I had kind of known about or had done something with. When I first was starting off, now I started off and I was a freelancer, so I was saying yes to a lot of things. And it made sense those first couple of years to say yes to anything that I felt ethically that I probably could deliver on. So I got to go to the country of Guyana for 2 months on a team. I got to work in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, with some stuff going on with Native American tribes over with a consulting firm. So there's a lot I was saying yes to, and it was very exciting because I was starting to go, wow, look at all the colors on the palette here that I could use. I was also saying yes to stuff that just bored me senseless.
Hmm.
And that was, I remember I had a contract through another consulting firm to put together workshops for a federal agency. And they said, could you put together a thing on time management? And there was a big book about time management at the time. So I did. And I remember getting there, teaching it. Well, you need to have 3 lists, the A list, the B list. And I'm talking about this. And inside my brain, I'm going, I don't do any of that crap. I mean, maybe it works. I don't. And I thought, what am I doing here? And
Mm.
so I thought, I don't want to be doing that.
Mm.
It probably works fine. I didn't feel like I was lying to people, but to talk about, I thought, I have no interest in that. I'm not going to use the stuff. But anyway, those first couple of years, it was great to say yes to a lot of stuff because it really helped me go, I like that. Nah, that sort of. But then after that, I wish I had started saying no far more often. Uh, and I'll give you one example of that. I would get called sometimes to just, could you come in and help facilitate this meeting? Now, if I get called to help facilitate something that I'm already involved in, that's fine. But just to come in, hey, we're having a meeting, could you come in? So I get up to speed on their agenda, and I'm there saying, hey, well, we haven't heard from Hunter for a while. Hey, what do you have to say? I just have no interest in that. And consequently, when I would say yes to those, I would do, mediocre work.
Mm.
There are people here in the DC area who love doing that work, and I truly wish earlier on I would have had the guts to say, geez, I'm really sorry. I can recommend a couple people, but it's not me. Because I think my reputation would have gotten, I think I would have had a better reputation earlier.
Mm.
Of people saying, oh, you ought to call him because he does blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean you have to have some tiny, narrow focus, but boy, saying yes to stuff that you're mediocre at. And even, God, even like 10, 15 years ago, I said yes to something. And had I stopped to think for a minute, I thought, I'm not interested in that anymore. Why am I doing it? I had the skills to do it. And what came across and didn't come across to me until well into it is I was phoning it in. And I really don't, it's not fair to the client. And it's, so first of all, it's not fair to the client. The second thing is just, it's not a good way to build a career. The fact they never called again makes perfect sense. I wouldn't call me either. Something like that. So,
but that's a good awareness to have, right? I mean, you were, sounds like you were kind of in tune with the fact that it wasn't, rewarding, I guess, to you, like you expect it to be when you engage with something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Can I add one thing to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this was, there was one year where I had 3 big consulting assignments. I mean, they were lucrative, they were big and complex. If you had looked at them, you go, wow, this is great. And I was excited about it. One of them was the one I talked about before that I shouldn't have said yes to. The other 2, the clients, it was union and management in one instance, and they said they wanted to be able to work together. They didn't. They just wanted to be able to say we hired a consultant. And then the third one, I forget what it was, but they really weren't. I think they just wanted to say, well, we got a guy who wrote a book about this stuff and it still didn't work. And I was feeling really bad, like I'm a really bad consultant. And I was talking to my wife and she said, well, I said, maybe I'm just not any good at this anymore. And she said, well, I don't think you've lost your skills in the last 6 months. She said, maybe you were never any good. And by the way, she was joking because she knew that would get my attention. So you don't have to be writing me, go to the Hallmark store and say, oh, we got to find a nice card for Rick. It was a great thing to do. At any rate, I was telling a friend of mine who actually teaches at Vanderbilt now. And she said, so did you, and also my wife said, look, you've taken up music again. Why don't you just back off and play a little more music and don't say yes so much? So I was talking to my friend Kim, who works at Vanderbilt. She said, so are you listening? Are you doing what Kathy said? And I said, no. And she said, why aren't you listening to your wife? And I said, well, I don't want to retire. I just don't get the concept. But I'd like to know if there's enough money there that in case I ever needed to or decided I wanted to. She said, how much more money do you need? And I said, I don't know. And she said, that'll keep you working. And what happened with that is combining what Kathy said with what Kim said, I thought, I'm only going to say yes to work that is going to give me as much pleasure as music. And music for me is not just performing. I mean, I was working on some stuff that if you heard me playing it, you go, boy, that's boring stuff to practice. I love doing it. I mean, but by having that standard and somebody calls, I'm going, am I energized by this? And so it gets back to that kind of thing of what you say yes and no to. It's a little harder when you're really trying to, you got a mortgage payment that to do that as often. But I wish I had done that more and earlier in my career.
Using that filter of, does it energize me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh,
So
sorry, that's.
I don't want to. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to minimize, because I think that's a great way to lay it out. But as a quick, like real elementary way to regurgitate that, it's say yes, 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 yes until you get to the point where you can say no, and use that filter of, does it energize me? But
Yeah,
finding that point, right, is the hard part.
it is a hard point. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, I appreciate. I've never gotten in all my times of asking that, such a great explanation of how to view kind of the transition, right? Because I think what you just described is something that is not only relevant for the person early in their career, it's also relevant for the mid career and later.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that. That was
Oh,
awesome.
you're welcome.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great question to ask. I don't know that I've ever, in the podcasts I've done, I don't know that anybody's ever asked that question. So that's great.
I used to be pretty consistent with ending on some random questions about travel and eating and all that, because I started this in January 2020. Yeah, and by the time I got to interviews in May or June of 2020, it was like, you can't talk about eating and travel and all those fun stuff. You know, everybody's eating ham sandwiches in their house. But yeah, so Rick, what's the best way? I will have some contact information
Yeah,
in the show notes, but just audibly here while I've got you, can you just
Sure.
share what your preferred way is for people to check you out and maybe reach out to you or connect with you or something like that?
great. Well, my website is rickmaurer.com, and you'll have it up there for the spelling. And if you just, if you want to talk, I mean, I really enjoy talking about this stuff. It probably comes across. I really am not a marketer at heart, so I'm not going to be turning it into some kind of big like, hey, but if you did this.
Right.
So, just, give me a call or send me an email first, which is rick@rickmaurer.com. My website has got tons of free stuff, including the ebook version of the new book, which is right there on the homepage. And and I've got videos there, and it's a good way to at least get introduced to the stuff. But by all means, give me a call, send me an email. I would love that.
Awesome. Well, Rick, it's been a pleasure. Love talking about change management. Love hearing your heart for it and your experience. I appreciate you being on the Catalyst podcast.
Oh, it's been a joy. Thank you so much, Hunter.
Thank you for being a part of this journey. Definitely subscribe, like, check out Be a Catalyst on Instagram and on Twitter. Also, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel where you'll find videos in addition to the Catalyst podcast recordings that give a little bit more context around my heart for training, my heart for seeing early to middle managers and first-time leaders really thrive and be a catalyst in the organization that they're in the project that they are after, everything that goes along with that. So thank you for being a part of this. Tune in for the next episode, and remember, be you, be confident, be a catalyst.